Hello, listeners. This is Babuji, your RJ. You are listening to the great Indian Monologue, the latest episode. It's been raining continuously for the past few days, and it's been really cold out there. But still, the thought that I'm actually going to talk to you again on yet another episode, it fills me with warmth to share the knowledge and to make you think. Right? So here we go. The topic for this talkathon or the talk show today is Nobel Peace Prize and the plight of Punjab. What is the connection between a Nobel Peace Prize given to somebody and some specific issues which people in Punjab are facing even today? Welcome, listeners, to the Green Revolution of India that changed our agricultural landscape forever and caused cancer trains to run in Punjab. Green Revolution was a term given to the modernization of agriculture to move away from traditional practices and start using laboratory modified seeds, chemical fertilizers, pesticides and herbicides. If you think this revolution started in India and Mr. M.S. Swaminathan started it, you need to listen to this monologue rather carefully because you'll be surprised to know more about, which would help you reassess your own ideas about Green Revolution, right? This Green Revolution was actually started in Mexico, a very faraway place from India, a long time before it reached India. The man who created it had a noble intention to begin with. He wanted to remove hunger from our world map, right? It was a very noble intention. But the scientific bent of mind that took him in a particular path made him ignore the traditional wisdom built over thousands of years of farming. We, the world, are still suffering due to his tunnel vision approach to farming. And how? Norman Ernest Borlaug was an American agri-scientist. You will remember this name forever after listening to this show. Plant pathology was his specialist skill. He was engaged by Rockefeller Foundation to handle their food development program to increase food production in third world countries and drive hunger out. The main villain for the food production was the pest attack. And plant pathology basically studies how the plants behave to different pest attacks and what to do about them, right? When World War II broke out, Rockefeller Foundation was forced to recall their employees from all over the world back into USA and re-engage them in peaceful countries. Around that time, Mexico, the largest neighbor of America, approached USA to invest in their infrastructure and help their economy grow. Mexico became an independent country just few years before the Second World War, and it needed a lot of investment for nation building, right? The same thing happened to India also, Just after we became independent, we needed a lot of investment to build our own infrastructure, right? From roads to industries and whatnot. So Mexico was doing a similar thing. So as part of American programs in Mexico, Rockefeller Foundation sent 3 scientists to Mexico with the aim of modernizing Mexican agriculture and food production. Norman Borlaug was one of them. These 3 scientists were instructed to travel around Mexico to record the various food crops in use, their varieties, and whether the food production was enough to meet the population growth of Mexico, and then to submit a detailed report. Right? This is how the normal studies go, right? Mexico, like India, is a country with multiple climatic zones, different terrains, and tribes practicing many different forms of agriculture. It has valleys, mountains, deserts, cold zones, temperate zones, whatnot. Okay. Norman Borlaug travels 5,000 miles crisscrossing Mexico, meeting farmers everywhere, recording their farming practices, seeds they use, the production technique, the yield volume, and so on. What did he find out? That Mexico was predominantly a corn-eating nation, that the tribes of Mexico were producing large quantities of local crops in addition to corn, like chilies, squash, melons, and many other vegetables and fruits. And that wheat was not cultivated in large scale, though the need for wheat was steadily increasing. Why it was so? Why the need for wheat was steadily increasing? Norman missed a point here, a big miss. Mexico had 800 plus varieties of local corn that he found out during his research. So, why would people of a nation that boasts such rich food diversity need wheat? It's a baffling question, right? Mexicans were introduced to wheat by Spanish colonizers, and over a few hundred years of slavery after Mr. Columbus accidentally landed in Mexico while trying to figure out a sea route to India. He landed in Mexico in the 1500s, called the land as India because he was looking for India, and he started calling the local tribes as Indians because he thought he landed in India. Mexico is in the South American continent that is home to many ancient tribes whom the West simply called Indians, Native Indians, Red Indians, and so on. Many countries of the South American continent was rich in gold, silver, and other such precious metals. Peru was the first country where the Spanish settlers discovered gold. Potosi is a place high up in the Andes mountain region in Peru. So high up, people had breathing difficulties at such high altitudes. Spanish settlers, they set up the first gold mine in Potosi and dug gold out for the next 400 years non-stop. Local people were forced to work in the gold mines, their land confiscated and converted into huge grazing lands that was used to raise cattle that would become food for the western settlers. In this process of digging gold and shipping it back to Spain, Spain became a global power and started colonizing countries from Africa to Asia. I'll talk to you about how the gold discovery in Potosi shaped the modern world, the modern slavery, induced or fueled world we are part of in a separate talk. Now let's get back to wheat. The colonization that started in Peru spread steadily into other South American countries, and Mexico also came under Spanish rule. Spanish settlers had a food problem. They just could not digest corn because corn was not their native food. Since they were raised on a steady diet of were available only in the valleys where many rivers ran. Though the settlers could convert these valley lands into wheat fields, they had a bigger problem during rainy seasons. The entire fields in the valleys were submerged underwater for weeks and months together, thereby destroying the wheat crops. A big problem, right? So however hard they tried to cultivate wheat in these conditions by innovating and improvising, they could not just grow enough wheat for their own consumption. While they were trying this out, the locals kept producing their local foods and established a strong control over production as well as markets. Hence, the Spanish settlers were hesitant to switch their crop from wheat to other local foods, such as corn, due to such reasons, and lack of expertise also. And many times when they tried, it created tension and conflicts between them and the local tribes. Even the wheat crop and rice and sugar canes that they tried to cultivate struggled to grow in Mexican climate. To add to their issues, stem rot disease struck these crops regularly, resulting in total loss of crop season after season. Norman Borlaug made detailed study of all these, and then he set up a camp one fine day to try growing wheat on his own that would help him to learn more about the practical issues. So what he does, he sets up his camp close to Mexican capital city, brings high-yielding native wheat varieties from across the world and tries to grow them in Mexico to understand which varieties grow well and which varieties don't in Mexican conditions. He systematically recorded the germination times, growth times, the flowering times of these plants, pest attacks, the severity, and so on in his research station, and identified few varieties that grew well and gave decent yields. Later on, after a harvest, when you mill the wheat to make wheat flour and then bread using the flour, the bread lacked one important parameter. It lacked taste. It simply tasted bland. A bigger problem, right? So how would he be able to convince people to accept new wheat varieties that do not taste good at all? So he kept on repeating his research and finally narrowed down on a variety with good yield as well as taste. But this variety had its own problem. When the wheat stem grows long, usually the stem is called the stalk of the plant. The top is loaded with a large number of grains, right? So the stems bend and a big portion of the grain, they get dislodged from the plant due to winds, thereby reducing the usable yield by a big percentage. This makes him look for dwarf varieties, those with shorter stalk and much thicker, so that the stalk can hold more grains without getting dislodged by winds. So Norman started carrying the seeds of this variety and tried to convince local farmers to try cultivating them, but none of them showed any interest in this dwarf wheat variety because it was simply new and they didn't know its potential. So Norman kept experimenting and he also set up another research station high up in the mountains in order to test the cultivation in different climate zones of Mexico. While he was trying this out, a co-scientist of his team identified that what really was ailing the local food system was lack of awareness and logistics. People in many regions of Mexico were not aware of the kind of food being produced by the neighbors, plus the different terrains and climatic conditions posed logistic issues for transporting food across these regions. So this scientist started distributing local corn seed varieties to different regions and thereby increasing the corn production. But wheat was still a problem, Norman's problem. So Norman Borlaug meets a Mexican farmer who had imported a dwarf wheat seed variety from Texas, the neighboring country USA. Texas is a state in US, and he cultivated it in his land. Since Norman knew about seed dislodging problem due to short and thin stalk of this particular variety, he forewarns the farmer about the potential loss of major portion of the harvest due to dislodging of the grains. In addition to warning this farmer, he also handed the new seeds from his laboratory to try it out in case if the predictions are true. The skeptical Mexican farmer watches his yield slowly disappearing due to dislodging of grains from the stalk as Norman forewarned. So he begins to trust Norman Borlaug and sows the seeds given to him by Norman in his field. Around the same time, a fresh round of stem rot disease spread in Mexican fields, destroying standing crops of wheat, paddy and sugarcane everywhere. Most of the crops were damaged except the one standing in the field of this farmer who used the new wheat seeds from Norman that withstood the stem rot disease and gave a good yield. The word about this miracle spread so fast, almost all the farmers of Mexico started asking for Norman's laboratory tweaked seeds at once, and they started cultivating them. Though there were a few more stem rot disease breakouts that affected even the newer varieties given by Norman, Norman kept tweaking them again and again till these seeds became immune to stem rot disease. What happened then was kind of a miracle. Yields started going up, and within some years, Mexican wheat production grew and grew to meet and surpass the local demand for wheat grains. In fact, it multiplied threefold by the time Norman's experiment was declared as a success, and this effort was labeled as Green Revolution. So this was the origin of Green Revolution. Though Mexico mastered the production side, transportation and markets were still huge issues. Unlike the neighboring USA, which had big rivers that enabled farmers to do river transportation of their harvest to markets and sell them at lower prices, Mexican wheat was still costly. So, Mexico started increasing the number of varieties with higher and higher yields to such an extent that at some point in time, they were even able to gift these varieties to USA and to sell these varieties back to USA. Other countries also started showing interest in the newer wheat varieties that Norman Borlaug produced from his research stations. The next frontier for Norman was to create infrastructure to spread the knowledge of cultivating these newer varieties across the world, thereby creating fresh marketplaces everywhere. To do this, he then goes on to set up the first ever modern agriculture institute of our world and invited researchers from all over the world to come and learn how to cultivate the newer dwarf varieties. From seeds to harvest to markets, the chemical fertilizers needed to grow them. You see, these varieties needed much higher quantity of nitrogen than what was available in the soil. So, the need of chemical fertilizers. And what chemical pesticides are to be applied. Again, you see, since these varieties have been tweaked in laboratories, they are prone to more frequent pest attacks that can be controlled only by using chemical pesticides. So these fertilizers and pesticides, they need tools. So what kind of tools are to be used, how to use them, and how to harvest the yield using machines. Why machines? Manual labor cost has been and will always be a problem in commercial farming, and hence mechanization was pushed as a solution, as machines can harvest more and quicker, thereby reducing the manual cost. The catch is, machines can harvest efficiently only if the plants are dwarf in size. Only the smaller stemmed plants can be harvested efficiently using the machines. That is why the dwarf variety. The invitation to world researchers given by the research institute was backed with financial grant to complete the study and even an offer to help them do their higher studies in prestigious American universities with more financial assistance. In return, these trained researchers were expected to spread these dwarf varieties in the respective countries and the tools and appliances. Simple enough and lucrative enough to attract top talent from distant corners of the world, right? So, within a very short time, researchers from around the world started flocking into this institute to learn the skills, and they went back to spread dwarf varieties, the chemical fertilizers and pesticides, and the tools and appliances in their respective countries. By 1970, this initiative was hailed as a huge success, as world wheat production from America to Africa to Asia to Europe went up dramatically, and Norman Borlaug was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for bringing in the Green Revolution, not just as a scientist, but as a nobleman who helped to solve hunger issue of our world. He simply helped our world to get rid of hunger. A really noble achievement, right? By late 60s, parallelly, India and Pakistan were going through unprecedented drought and famine, and food scarcity became the biggest problem. Rockefeller Foundation knew this and decided to help such third world countries like ours master their food production by using modern methods. So what they did? They joined hands with Ford Foundation and International Monetary Fund, so-called IMF, to set up a program to spread the Green Revolution and dispatch Norman Borlaug's team to Indian subcontinent. Listeners, this is Radio Udaan. I'm your RJ Babuji Janakarajan. We are just halfway through the Green Revolution story, and today's time limit for my monologue is already up. So, let's wait for one more week to know what Mr. Borlaug and his team did in India and why a train in Punjab is named as Cancer Train. Till then, goodbye, stay blessed, we will talk again. Bye.